Good morning, and on behalf of our entire weather team, I would like to wish each and every one of you a very happy and blessed Thanksgiving. I do hope you all have a wonderful day. Today, we will be covering the weather outlook for the holiday and for the upcoming forecast period. We are going to discuss a major winter storm that is currently affecting the Great Lakes and the Northeast, as well as much of the Mid-Atlantic, with significant lake effect snowfall. That low-pressure system has moved northward, and we will talk about what that means for you.
There is another weather system moving into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes that is expected to bring heavy snowfall totals to that region as well. We are also tracking a potential snowstorm for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, which could occur around the 2nd or 3rd of December. After that, we are looking at a pattern of colder air and more opportunities for snowfall. We have a great deal to cover today, so I am glad you could join us. As you may be able to tell, my voice is thankfully sounding a bit better. We are getting very close to returning to our normal operations as I continue to recover from a rather persistent illness. Now, turning to our weather map, there are a couple of areas of interest to discuss. We do have some storm activity over the northwest, bringing snowfall to the higher elevations and rainfall to the lower elevations, which is quite typical for this time of year. In fact, for the winter season, it is actually a relatively quiet day for our friends in the northwest. Meanwhile, we are observing a great deal of snow activity happening around the Great Lakes. Very heavy lake effect snowfall is ongoing in that region. There are also a few passing snow showers across the plains and even here along the lower Appalachian mountain range. I am seeing some light activity in that area. However, outside of that significant lake effect snowfall, it is shaping up to be a rather pleasant Thanksgiving day, although it is certainly quite cold out there. That lake effect snow is highly impactful, so let us take a closer look at that situation because it is quite impressive. We have been discussing this event for a few days, and we can clearly see there are very heavy, well-defined bands of lake effect snow. I would say the most intense band right now is the one affecting the upper peninsula of Michigan and extending into the northern tip of the lower peninsula of Michigan. We also have a few heavier areas over Indiana and lower Michigan. Another band is coming off Lake Erie and moving into parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. And finally, there is some heavier activity up near the Adirondacks and Watertown, New York. I have a very dear friend named William who serves in the Army as a helicopter pilot, and he is stationed up in Watertown. So as you can imagine, I hear all about the weather up there. He was my very first childhood friend, and he remains my greatest friend, for whom I am deeply appreciative. He lives up there, and I suppose today I am just feeling particularly thankful. Please forgive the personal aside, but a special Thanksgiving greeting to my friend William. Now, let us move on and take a look at the computer model guidance. We will examine what is expected to happen later today and then review the entire upcoming weather pattern. We will begin with our European model. I should mention that I am recording this video a little bit earlier in the day than usual as I have family plans for the holiday. This is the 0Z model run, which is the main forecast model that runs overnight. There will be more updated guidance coming out later today. The 12Z guidance from the European model will be available in about 2 hours from the time of this recording. You will likely be viewing this video a little while after that, as I generally post them in the late afternoon and evening. I find that is the best time, as most everyone is available to watch then. In any case, we will be posting a great deal of the updated model guidance within our online weather community. If you join us there, you will receive the very latest information. Even when I am not posting, there are many knowledgeable members in there sharing every single update from every model run. It is wonderful to see how our community has grown. We are now well over 600 members, and so many of you are very active. Looking at the model guidance, we can see the lake effect snowfall is expected to continue throughout the day, which is no surprise as the cold air is still moving into the region. This particular forecast is for 7 post-meridian Eastern Time, which of course is quite a bit earlier in the day for those along the west coast. And we can see that this storm system in the northwest will continue to intensify as the day progresses. So even though this morning at 11:51 Eastern Time, it did not appear too severe, conditions are expected to worsen out there. And again, the other major story is the continuing lake effect snowfall. The snow is already accumulating heavily in some of these areas, and it is just going to continue. This is truly remarkable weather for Thanksgiving, and I know that last year, many of you also dealt with lake effect snow on the holiday. So for some, this makes it the second year in a row. For tomorrow, on Friday, the 28th, We see much of this snowfall moving into the northern Rockies and northern plains. The lake effect snowfall will begin to subside a bit, though it will still be ongoing. A lot of this moisture is also spreading farther eastward into the northeast, so we may see some passing snow showers. Naturally, the farther one gets from the lakes, the less likely it is to be a heavy, consistent band of snowfall. But some snowflakes will likely be flying in the northeast corner of our nation tomorrow, and it will be plenty cold enough for them. For Saturday, the 29th, we can see that next snowstorm we mentioned for the northern plains, Midwest, and Great Lakes, and perhaps even some of the Ohio Valley, beginning to develop by Saturday afternoon. As we continue, into the evening hours at about 10 post-meridium Eastern Time, you can adjust accordingly for your own time zone. We have a low-pressure system situated over parts of the Midwest. We are seeing heavy snowfall in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan, even extending into Ohio. This is forecast to be a large-scale and widespread event. This is a very large region that will be seeing snowfall from this system. I believe there is a good chance this will be a significant storm for the Midwest and Great Lakes. We have been discussing this particular area seeing major snowstorms for several weeks now. This has been the region that I have said is really going to be active in the upcoming pattern, and we see that forecast coming to fruition with this system. By the morning of Sunday, the 30th, we can see that this system is no longer the strongest low-pressure center. It becomes a little more difficult to pinpoint with the lowest pressure somewhere up here. It is not an exceptionally strong system by this point, but the intensity of the low does not always determine the severity of the impacts. The two do not always directly correlate. Sometimes you can see significant impacts from a very weak low-pressure system, and other times a strong low brings lesser impacts. So there can be some variance. There will still be a great deal of snowfall for the Great Lakes and into Canada. We are also beginning to see some snow for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, especially in the interior sections from this system. It is even likely we will see thunderstorm activity across the deep south along the cold front that is stretching down from that very weak low. As we continue into Sunday night, around 10 post-meridium Eastern Time, we see the low moving eastward. We are left with mostly high-elevation snowfall in the northeast. Some new lake effect snowfall will also start to develop after this system moves through, because that cold wind will once again move right over the lakes. So those lakes will begin to generate snow once more. I can only imagine what it is like to receive all this lake effect snow, then have a major snowstorm on the way, followed by even more lake effect snow. I will be very interested to see the final snowfall totals for those areas by the time we reach the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of December, because the amounts could be extraordinary. We do see that as time goes on, reaching the morning of Tuesday, the 2nd, our next system is already beginning to take shape. We can already see the next system beginning to set up. It is a very active pattern indeed. The southern jet stream is feeding moisture into this system, while the northern jet stream is bringing not only some moisture, but also very rich cold air. And those two are coming together. As a result, we can see a number of storms, including likely thunderstorms once again for the deep south, which is becoming a recurring trend. Some light snowfall is also possible for the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. But please watch how this progresses as we move forward. This system just continues to intensify, with a low developing off the South Carolina coast by Tuesday afternoon on the 2nd. Then we see that low move offshore and begin to rapidly intensify, dropping to 995 millibars. Following that, we will see snowfall getting started in the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. This is for Wednesday at 1 in the morning on the 3rd, and the pressure drops further to 993 millibars. The storm is in a nearly perfect location, just to the southeast of Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard. This could result in heavy snowfall for much of Ohio and West Virginia. For them, the storm would be coming to a close, but in the hours prior, Pennsylvania could see heavy snow across almost the entire state, as well as New York State and much of New England. This has the potential to be a very significant system for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, but there are still 5 or 6 days to go. Therefore, there is still time for this forecast to change quite a bit, so please keep that in mind. We are still trying to determine the precise track of this storm. The most recent trends, as compared to yesterday's forecast, have shown the models progressively pushing this storm a little farther to the northwest. So the question is whether it will continue to shift farther northwest,
or if it will remain in its current projected path.
Or it is possible it could revert a bit farther back to the southeast.
We need to get the fine-tuning of those details worked out because it could be the deciding factor for many areas. This is not a certainty for anyone, so I do not want anyone's hopes to get too high just yet. However, this is a very promising sign for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. As the days progress, our confidence in the forecast will increase depending on what we see from the models. That storm then comes to a close later on the 3rd.
After that, we are left with some smaller, quote, clipper systems moving through, as you can see there, for the Northern Plains, Midwest, and Great Lakes. We may get another more potent clipper system trying to move through. Then we do see a bit of a warm-up finally by the time we are reaching day 11 of the forecast, which I believe is Monday the 8th. It might even be day 12, which is in the long range, so we must take it with a grain of salt. But this pattern does finally take us out of the Arctic air and into something a little more zonal with some southeast ridge influence.
By the 8th, we will have to see if that forecast holds true. But regardless, today is the 27th. We have 3 more days of November, not counting today, and this would be 8 days into December. So this is quite far out in the forecast period. And if we see cold weather from now until the 7th, that is a very significant cold and snowy pattern that we find ourselves in.
We do see a coastal low right here again, another signal. This is in the long-range forecast, but we see another similar coastal system. The difference is there is just not as much cold air in place, so we end up with mostly all rainfall from this one on this particular model run, but that is a signal for a storm, and if the temperature forecast changes, that could look a little different. And then towards the end of the period, which again, please take with a grain of salt, there is still a great deal of snowfall for the western mountain ranges and also for the north-central states. We see another snow system getting started, and it looks like we will be pulling a cold front eastward once more. This would perhaps show signs of us cooling back down in the east again with another Arctic blast. The GFS model is going to agree on multiple fronts. Obviously, the lake effect snowfall is ongoing. We then get this major Midwest, Great Lakes, and Ohio Valley storm that moves through. And then we do get this more southern storm developing as of the early morning model run, which is the one we are using today. And as a reminder, I am making this video much earlier than I typically do. As of that early morning model run from overnight, we do end up seeing this low much closer to the coast. This would lead to more rainfall for eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, southern New England, and even southern New York, creating some mixing issues with the heaviest snowfall. In that scenario, the heaviest snow would be more for the interior of the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, as you can see. Now, before we move on, I want to show you something else because I do have some of the newer mid-morning model run available. It is not completely finished running. I only have it out to about 200 hours, but I can see this storm on that latest guidance. And what we see here is that the storm is a little bit farther southeast. As a result, we see a lot more of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and southern New York, and southern New England receiving snowfall, as opposed to that mixed precipitation solution. So again, I will go back and forth here. This is the earlier run, and this is the latest run. You can tell that it has obviously shifted slightly to the southeast. There is a good possibility that this forecast will trend back and forth. This does mean the possibility of snow is not gone for southern New England, eastern Pennsylvania, or New Jersey. These are typical model fluctuations that we often see about 5 to 6 days out. We just have to patiently monitor these changes as we get closer and try to find a consistent trend in the model guidance to determine what is most likely to occur. So, returning to the 6Z run, let us continue our analysis. That particular system eventually moves out of the area, and we will examine the total snowfall amounts a little later. What is interesting about this 6Z run is that it shows another event happening right around Friday, the 5th. Now, this is still within a 10-day forecast period, where we see the northern jet stream dipping down and the southern jet stream bringing in moisture once again over the deeper south. You may recall, the European model did not show this quite as strongly, but we are seeing another snow system developing for the lower Midwest, the lower Ohio Valley, and even into Kentucky. This then affects a large portion of the Mid-Atlantic, including Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, before moving up into the Northeast as another coastal system. So this particular model suggests that we should be watching for not just one, but possibly two or more systems along the East Coast. Now, at this point, there is not a great deal of cold air present. This is similar to the European model, where we see another coastal system form, but there simply is not enough cold air to produce significant snowfall. And I believe the European model indicated something very similar. In fact, consistent with the European model, we are currently seeing a warmer pattern developing for a few days after the 10th of the month. This could be a developing trend, or it might just be too far out in the forecast models, causing them to revert. It is hard to say for certain, but this is what both models are indicating, and it is important for us to point out any consistencies we find. Now let us look at the total precipitation. We can see considerably more in the west than we saw before, and perhaps more in the east as well. So let us examine the anomalies, which are the differences from what is normal for this time of year. Indeed, we are seeing much more green on the map across the nation today compared to yesterday. However, some parts of California remain quite dry compared to normal. In fact, significantly dry, with several inches below the average expected over the next 15 days. But for the majority of the country, conditions are either very slightly below average or quite a bit above average, as you can see. This means a little more precipitation is forecast for the United States as a whole in today's model run. Turning to the total snowfall on our European model, what we are seeing is a significant amount of snow for the mountainous west, as well as for the plains and the northern Midwest. In fact, we see multiple feet of snow expected all the way from the northern plains through the upper Midwest and into the Great Lakes region. Then even the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast will see effects from that snow system as it moves through. It appears we are looking at a plowable snowfall event for many of these areas, with several inches of snow expected. The GFS model places this system a little farther to the southeast. As a reminder, there are two snowfall events in the east on this particular model run, which would result in quite a bit of accumulation. Now, I would like to go back for a moment to isolate that first snow system. So let us focus on this first storm right here. I will go ahead and zoom in to the eastern region so we can all get a better look. This particular forecast is through Wednesday the 3rd according to this model. With this single snowstorm, we can see the heaviest totals are farther inland, affecting northern New England, upstate New York, and northwestern and central Pennsylvania, as opposed to the coastal areas. This means that southern New England and the immediate east coast of the Mid-Atlantic do not receive quite as much. But if we switch back to the 12Z model run, we see a different story, with eastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and southern New England receiving those heavier totals, including New York City. So, the forecast will certainly shift back and forth. I cannot tell you with certainty what will or will not happen at this point, as we are still looking quite far out. However, some model guidance does suggest that the coast could see some snowfall, while other guidance indicates that it will not. This is a very typical back and forth situation when forecasting at this range. We will be sure to keep you updated with every new model run. There is certainly a great deal of information to review with this developing system, and it has become quite a topic of discussion for many folks lately. Now, turning our attention to the temperatures, I will reiterate that we are cooler for the time being and for early December. However, the models have shown a warming trend as we get closer to the 10th of the month. This could just be a temporary trend that will fade, or it could be an indication of what is to come. A solid trend that will indeed hold true. We will have to watch it very closely. For now, we are looking at very cold conditions for the next few days, and into the weekend we expect a second Arctic blast. Then, a third one will arrive for the first few days of December. It is right around the 8th of the month that we start to see a southeast ridge build in, and that lasts through the 9th and the 10th. After that, we get a brief cool down before temperatures warm back up again around the 11th and 12th. However, a significant Arctic outbreak is clearly indicated toward the end of this model run's forecast period, which again is a detail so far out in the forecast at hour 360 that it should be viewed with caution. The broader picture here is that we expect very cold conditions up until about the 7th or 8th. After that, we begin to see warmer air moving in, but it does not appear to be permanent, as these models do trend toward more Arctic air arriving after that warm-up. Therefore, it should be a temporary warm spell if the models are correct. Now, looking at the GFS model,
we are going to see some fairly good agreement. We see cool down number 1, cool down number 2, and then cool down number 3, which is a bit more significant than what the European model shows.
This model even shows a 4th cool down as we approach the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Following that, it also indicates a warm-up, but with less of a sign of Arctic air returning afterward, which is certainly worth noting. Now I want to pull up something more critical. Let us look at the end of these ensemble model runs. Let me advance this one toward the end of its forecast period as well. What we are seeing is that even for the period of December 2nd through the 12th, we still see warmer air along the west coast, which indicates a positive P&A pattern. At the same time, we still see Arctic air showing up on the ensemble models. Now, these ensemble models are made up of 20 to 30 different forecasts that are averaged together, which is very helpful for long-range forecasting. Typically, the ensemble models perform best in the day 5 through 15 time frame, which is exactly what we are examining right now. This is in comparison to what we call the operational models, such as the main GFS and European models. What we are looking at here is the European ensemble model. On it, we do see some slight indications of that southeast ridge, but nothing dramatic. It mostly shows cold air continuing from the 2nd through the 12th. Here's the GFS ensemble model, which is showing much the same thing. We see very good agreement between them. We have warmer air along the west coast, Arctic air continuing to move into the east, and that southeast ridge remains slightly present over the very deep southeast. What this tells me is that until we see the ensemble models begin to change their outlook regarding this long-range cold air, I am not yet convinced of that warmer pattern around the 8th, 10th, or 12th. Of course, this is no reason for concern, but I prefer to wait until I see some strong, consistent guidance. So I would encourage you to maintain that same perspective. With all of that said, I want to wish a very happy Thanksgiving to each and every one of you. I am truly thankful for all of you watching. It is a privilege to make these videos for you, something I have enjoyed doing for many years, and I hope to continue for many more. I sincerely hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoy some wonderful food with your loved ones, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.